Hey everybody, it's Kendra. Welcome to my channel if you're new, and welcome back if you've been here before. My video today is going to be a kombucha and or June troubleshooting video. I did 2 kombucha videos and 1 June video, and thank you so much for everyone who watched them. I feel like they've gotten a really good reception, and that's amazing. Thank you. And I've had a lot of comments and questions in the comment section of those videos, so I thought today I would answer a few common questions if you are brewing kombucha and or June. Actually, if you're just fermenting in general, these are some issues that you may be having to deal with. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So my number 1 problem is fruit flies. If you are brewing kombucha or June, actually I think if you're doing any type of fermenting, fruit flies love this stuff. They love the smell of like kind of rotting sort of things, and they are such a pain. So first of all, if you're brewing kombucha, you need to think 2 things. How do you prevent the fruit flies from actually getting into your brew and contaminating it? Because if that happens, you've got to chuck everything. And then also, how do you kill them? Because they're super annoying, and if you don't do anything to kill them, you are just gonna have like a fruit fly nest. So first of all, to prevent them from actually getting into the brew, make sure that you have whatever type of cloth you're using to keep out flies and dust and all that stuff. Make sure it's very, very tightly secured. So you'll see back here, I have my kombucha vessels. So the 2 big ones in the middle are June and kombucha. And you can see I've got my cute little dish towels very securely fastened with one of those hair bands. Like, I don't use rubber bands or yarn or string or anything. I use the hair bands, the elastic headbands that you would use for exercising. Those work really, really well. So that's how I prevent the bugs from getting in. How do I kill them? Well, you'll also see, you can see 2 little glasses down there. Those are my fruit fly traps. Basically what you want to do is put a little bit of already brewed kombucha or kombucha vinegar into a glass, and then put in some dish soap. Swirl around the dish soap. Basically what happens is that the fruit flies will go down there and think, oh wow, like it's open, I can drink this, this is so wonderful. And then they try to land on the surface, and apparently the dish soap like does something with the surface tension, and then they drown and they die. So doing this will really trap a ton of fruit flies. I'm going to show you in a second just how many you can trap. It's disgusting. Okay, fruit flies. These are my cool fruit fly traps. I want to show you how many dead fruit flies are actually in this. I would say that this is probably about 2 weeks worth, maybe even 1 week. I definitely had a lot of fruit flies recently, and all those little dark spots are fruit flies. So this first problem kind of leads into my second problem, which is what do you actually do if you get fruit flies in your brew, and what do you do if you get mold? So this is basically dealing with like yucky stuff in the brew. You gotta chuck it. If you get mold, you know, if you get mold, you're gonna know it's mold. If you're kind of questioning if it's mold, it might not be mold. It might actually be yeast strands, and it might actually just be tea leaves. So for example, I actually went to France in January, and I took my mother-in-law some SCOBY and starter liquid. She was really interested in brewing kombucha, and there are a couple brands of kombucha in France, but obviously it's still expensive, so it's nice to make your own. So I'd say about 3 months after I got her started brewing kombucha, she called me super frantic one day, freaking out, like, oh my God, Kendra, I've got mold. I'm like, you probably don't have mold. Let me see it. Like, you know, get me on video chat, send me some photos. And it was not mold. Like, I could tell it clearly was not mold. It was basically like strands of yeast kind of around the SCOBY. And I think she had some tea leaves in there too. If you've got mold, I mean, granted, knock on wood, I've never had mold or fruit flies in my brew, so I can't say with 100% certainty like what it would look like. But I've seen enough pictures of mold on kombucha to know that it's like fuzzy, you know, like mold. If you get mold on bread, it's furry. Often I believe it is white or green. So if it's mold, it's going to be on top of your SCOBY, and you're going to know that it actually is mold. So first of all, if you think you've got mold, don't panic, because it could be tea or it could be yeast strands. And then if you do verify that it is mold, or you see you've got fruit flies in there, you've got to toss it. Don't just take out the SCOBY and wash it. If you've got fruit flies in there, maybe they've laid eggs, and the last thing you want to do is just keep going with this cycle. Nobody wants to drink mold. Nobody wants to drink fruit fly eggs. Gross. Number 3, you have too much SCOBY. Oh my gosh, who would ever think of such a problem? It's not really a problem, is it? There's always a use for SCOBY. Every time you brew kombucha, you get a new layer of SCOBY. And if you're brewing regularly, frankly, like you can end up with a good thick layer of SCOBY, and then it just sort of takes over and you can't get as much sweet tea in there, and therefore, you know, you're making less kombucha. So basically every couple months, maybe like every 3-4 months, when you seem to be getting a really thick layer of SCOBYs, you gotta peel them off. So what do you do with all those SCOBYs? Make a Scobie Hotel. I'll show you my Scobie Hotel in just a second. All right, so I quickly want to show you my Scobie Hotel. So basically, you know, I've got a glass container here, and this is just where I keep all my backup SCOBYs. Looks kind of gross, but this is a good little way to store them. So basically, I would say every month, maybe like every 2 or 3 times I actually brew, I'm gonna add a little bit of the sweet tea that I make for my normal batch and just put it in here to keep feeding this. And again, always keep it nice and secured, because the last thing we want is to get fruit flies actually in the Scobie Hotel. The Scobie Hotel is really helpful. Let's say, you know, let's say you do actually get mold or you get fruit flies. It's good to have some backup SCOBYs in case you have to totally start from scratch. Also, maybe you've got a friend who wants some SCOBYs. So let's say like you're brewing and you don't have too many extra SCOBYs. It's nice to have a Scobie Hotel in case somebody needs some SCOBYs and you know, maybe you're in the middle of your brew and you want to give them the SCOBY, but you don't want to interrupt your brew right in the middle. You can give them one from your hotel. Also, if you have too many SCOBYs, give them to friends. Like if somebody's interested in brewing, just say like, hey, I've got this huge layer, here you go. Another thing that I have actually done with excess SCOBYs, I've given them to my friends who have chickens. I have a couple friends who each have chicken coops, and I think they each have 4 lovely little lady chickens. Chickens love to eat SCOBYs and they kind of go crazy for it. I haven't done too much research about it being beneficial for chickens. I know it is beneficial. It's good for them to get this bacteria and yeast, and I think it does something with the shell. I think it like strengthens the shell. Also, another idea, if you have extra SCOBYs, I have not tried this, so I don't know if it tastes good. But what about blending up some SCOBY in like a smoothie? I mean, I can't imagine it would add that much taste, and you know, you're just ingesting even more like good bacteria, so why not? If anybody tries that, let me know and I will be sure to try it very soon in the future and report back. Okay, next problem. It brews too fast and you just cannot keep up. Like you cannot drink kombucha or Jun fast enough to keep up with it. Like it keeps fermenting and fermenting. Take a break. So I don't really have this problem with kombucha, but I do have this problem with Jun, and I really had this problem a lot this summer. Actually, over the summer when it was warmer, I had this problem with both of them, but more so Jun, because Jun ferments more quickly than kombucha. So what I ended up having to do was just stop. Basically, if I had a vessel, you know, a 2-gallon vessel of Jun or kombucha that was ready, that was fermented, I would, you know, take off 2 gallons and flavor it and then bottle that. But I would not refill the vessel with sweet tea. I would just let that vessel sit for like a week, 2 weeks. It's fine. Leave it at room temp. Obviously still have it covered, you know, tightly covered and everything. And then when it seems like I'm kind of running low on kombucha or Jun, that's when I would make a new batch of sweet tea and add it. And then it does what it's supposed to do. It ferments as normal. So this way you can take a little bit of a break and not be so overwhelmed with having kombucha and Jun just like coming out of your ears. Also, another idea, if your brew is fermenting way too quickly, just let it turn to vinegar. If you want to slow down, if you've got this huge backlog of kombucha in your fridge waiting to be consumed, just let your vessel turn to vinegar. I mean, it probably will take a couple months for like 2 gallons of kombucha to turn into vinegar completely, but that's another idea. Okay, another issue that may arise, you're going on vacation. Actually, my mother-in-law called me at the end of July and she was gonna be gone for like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I said, you know, either just empty it, just leave a little bit of, you know, leave your SCOBY, leave your starter liquid in the bottom and then refill when you come back. Or I said you can let it turn to vinegar. Another option, you could just leave your vessel full, and then if you don't want vinegar when you get back, just empty it off and dump it and start again. Now, this is something I have done with my kombucha a couple times just because I've had my moments where I'm not paying attention and I didn't realize how quickly my kombucha was fermenting, and I tasted it and I'm like, ugh, I can't save that. It's too far gone. It's way too sour. It's already on the way to vinegar world. So I just emptied it off, like filled up 2-gallon glass jars and dumped it. Now, with that being said, I try not to do that with June, just because June is more expensive to produce, because with June you're using a cup of honey for every gallon of June, whereas kombucha you're using a cup of sugar. So obviously cup to cup, honey is way more expensive than sugar. So basically I'm much more concerned about my June and the timing of my June. If my kombucha goes over, okay, whatever. Another issue you may encounter is that your brew just seems to be a little bit cloudy, which basically is coming from too much yeast. You know, every time you brew, you end up having this spent yeast at the bottom of the vessel, and over time it just builds up. So I would recommend maybe 3 times a year completely clean out your vessel. You know, remove your SCOBY and remove some of the starter liquid and just set that aside and cover it, and then completely empty out your vessel, clean everything, let it air dry, just get it all really, really clean, and then restart. That's gonna sort of balance the amount of yeast in there. All right, another problem is that your brew is too sour. So basically to me, this means that you let your initial fermentation go too long. So first of all, you could dump it. If it's way too sour and you just know you won't drink it, just dump it and start over. You could also let it turn to vinegar, that's fine. And also another thing you need to be doing, just like make sure you're tasting your brew early enough so that you don't get to that point where it's too sour and you're like, oh crap, I can't save this. So I would say, you know, I brew 2 gallons at a time. So I would say by like day 7, I'm always tasting mine, because if it's warmer, if it's summer and it's warm, my brew could easily be done in a week. Also, along those lines, another problem that you may encounter is that your brew just does not get fizzy. So to me, this could also mean that you let that initial fermentation stage go too long. The yeast has already consumed all of the sugar and there's just none left for the second fermentation stage and then the bottling stage. What you could do in this case, if your initial fermentation, if that brew tastes still kind of sweet tart, obviously it'll probably be more on the tart side, but if it still seems like you can save it, during the second fermentation stage where you're putting like fruit and you're essentially adding sugar to that brew, maybe let that brew sit a little bit longer to just get a little bit more sugar in there and let everything really work together, and then bottle it, you know, and then obviously when you bottle it, put in a raisin, because a raisin will also give it a little bit of extra sugar to create more carbonation. And then of course, you know, leave it at room temp for maybe like 2 or 3 days, and just every 12 hours, just crack open the bottle to see where your level of carbonation is actually at. Also, if your brew does not get very fizzy at first, don't panic. I remember when I first started brewing, it definitely took a while to get to that level of bubbliness that I actually liked. Felt like the first couple batches were super, super flat and it was really frustrating. But don't worry, just keep with it, and eventually like you'll figure out your rhythm, you'll figure out how to do it, what flavors to add, you know, what kind of fruits to add to really get things going. All right, and my last issue that some people have asked me about is growing your own SCOBY. So I've never actually grown my own SCOBY, so I can't say with 100% certainty that it'll work. But from what I have read, basically if you get a bottle of plain kombucha, you know, no flavor, I would suggest either GT's or Health Aid for this. Get a plain bottle of kombucha, dump it into a mason jar, you know, cover it with a towel, tightly secure it so the bugs can't get in, and just kind of let that sit at room temp and see what happens. You may get a layer of SCOBY on top. If that doesn't seem to work, maybe add a little bit of sweet tea to it, because that'll just kind of fuel the bacteria and you should get a layer of SCOBY. Also, I did have a comment on one of my videos about not using any starter culture, and I was very intrigued by this, and the commenter said basically if you just take a jar and you put in sweet tea and cover it and let it sit at room temp, that you'll grow a SCOBY. So I was intrigued and I was like, okay, we'll try it. I would not recommend this. The person who swears by this, like, I'm not sure what they're doing, and clearly they're doing something differently than I am, because this is the one situation where I have experienced mold, and I'll actually show it to you. So I just have this small little jar, and like here, just along here, you can definitely see some like fuzzy stuff. Like, so this is my only ever mold encounter. Actually, let me take this off and we'll see. So yeah, you can kind of see in there, it's definitely a bit gross looking, so I would not recommend this. So again, to the person who commented about this, if it works for you and you've got some legit SCOBY going, okay, but for me, I got some serious nasty mold going. And also, just regarding where to get a SCOBY from, I highly recommend Kombucha Kamp. I mean, it may seem expensive to pay $35 for an initial SCOBY, but really, like, if you're drinking kombucha every day, a bottle of kombucha can easily be $3 to $5. So my attitude is, a week worth of kombucha drinking is worth the price of a SCOBY, and the SCOBY is just the gift that keeps on giving, so you're basically gonna save so much money in the long run. All right, so there you go. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope that some of your kombucha questions were answered. Again, you know, I'm just a home brewer. I've been doing this a little bit over a year. I'm super into it, but I am by no means the ultimate authority on kombucha brewing, and I'm still constantly learning and figuring stuff out. But anyway, hope you found that helpful. Also, if you have any other questions that I did not address, please leave a comment down below and I will do what I can to figure out the answer for you. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.